Okay, we are in Yerushalmi base.
You know?
Yeah. No, you didn't miss anything. Yeah, right there, the Mishnah. Halacha Ches.
Oh, that's right. You weren't here Thursday.
I wasn't here Thursday. Wasn't here yesterday. So that's what we're up to. Okay.
All right.
There's my place here. Kosher b'soch beis rova. Anything which is within there's a halacha that between two types of grain, one has to make a distance of 10 amos, 10 amos and a half or 10 amos and a quarter. It's an area of called the beis rova, which is what? No, yeah, two types of grain. Yes, any type of grain. The beis rova is a quarter of the area of 50 by 50. So 50 square amos, so it's about approximately 10 by 10. No, that's not. That's from the previous Gemara. Okay. So kosher b'soch beis rova, even if the thing's growing within that distance of 10 amos between the two types of grain, they count to make up the measure of 10 and a quarter or 10 and a half amos. What are such things? Achilas hagefen. If you have growing there in those 10 amos a grapevine. The law is that on either side of a grapevine you have to have six tefachim of distance for the grapevine itself. So that 6 tefachim, which of course is 1 amma, on one side, and the 6 tefachim on the other side make up 2 amos of the 10 amos of distance between the two types of grain. And we're going to ask, what about the grapevine itself? Kever, if you have a grave. So even though you're not allowed to plant in the area of the grave, it's forbidden to plant there. Anyway, regardless of whether there's a problem with Kilayim or not, nonetheless, the fact that there's a kever there tells us that because the kever comprises part of the shiur of the 10 amos between the two areas of grain. Vasela, also if you have a stone in the middle, which obviously can't be planted because it's a stone. So nonetheless, only midas beis rova, all these things count as part of the measure of a beis rova. Tvua b'tvua beis rova. The shiur between two types of grain is beis rova, which again is 1/4 of the area of 50 square amos, which means approximately 10 by a quarter or 10 and a half. Yerek b'yerek, between two types of vegetables, right? Not grains, vegetables. The shiur, two types of vegetables, so the shiur is 6 tefachim. Much less, 6 tefachim, which is 1 amos. So between two types of grain, say between wheat and barley, you need 10 amos. Between 10 amos and a remainder. Between two types of vegetable, you only need a 6 tefachim, which is 1 amos. Tvua noita al gabe tvua. If you have, let's say, in that a gap of 10 and a quarter or 10 and a half amos between the two fields of grain, what happens if some of the grain is inclining in towards the middle, towards the area of the interruption? Or yerek gabi, the same thing where you have vegetables inclining in towards the area of interruption, so it diminishes the interrupted area. So, or tvua gabi yerek, you have tvua inclining towards grain, inclining towards vegetables. Yerek gabi tvua, vegetables inclining towards grain. Hakomutter, it's all okay. Doesn't matter as long as at the base there's the proper distance. Yeah, the roots, even if it goes up and the top and comes close together, it's okay. Chutz mitlas is except for a Greek gourd, because Greek gourds are particularly luxuriant foliage, and therefore if it inclines in towards the interrupted space, the vacant space, so it's a very improper. Rebbe says, Afakisho supola mitzri. The tradition I have is that this applies also to kishus, which is the hops or some other type of squash. I'm not sure exactly which one, and it also applies to Egyptian legumes. That their foliage, if it leans toward and takes us on the vacant space, then that's no good. However, Ron is divrei midvorai. I believe that says Rebbe that my colleagues were correct in that they said this halacha or this chumrah of not allowing any inclination towards the vacant space only applies by the las yivonis, by the Greek gourd, and not by the legumes and such like. Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, hi, you joining us?
Are you coming up hard?
Yeah. This is where we are. Rabbi Bun Bar Chia. Rabbi Merchi b'shem Rabbi Zira. Rabbi Merchi is the name of Rabbi Zira. Lo shanu el achilas hagefen. This is only true by that which we said. There's a halacha that between two different types of grain, in order to prevent them from becoming kilayim, you have to have a vacant space. That vacant space is approximately 10 amos, a little bit more than 10 amos. Of that vacant space, suppose you have an area which you can't plant anyway, not because you're intentionally leaving it fallow for the purpose of avoiding kilayim, but rather because you have some other reason which you must leave it fallow. For instance, in this case, we're talking about a case where you have a grapevine within those 10 amos. And since you have a grapevine within those 10 amos, so therefore the halacha is that in order to distance that grapevine from any other growth in and of itself, it has to have 6 tefachim around it. So that those 6 tefachim our Mishnah said, they comprise part and parcel of the 10 amma distance. However, lo shona el achilas hagefen, it's only true about that area which the grapevine has around it, meaning 6 tefachim in all directions, hagefen atzmo lo, but not the grapevine itself. Whereas the grapevine itself, let's say the grapevine is 3 tefachim thick. So you need to tack on an additional 3 tefachim to the 10 amos. The vine itself, the tree itself, doesn't join in to be considered interrupted space between the two different types of grain, only the surrounding area around the grapevine.
Is it because of all
No, it's because the Gemara says, why? Because the grapevine itself is forbidden to commingle with the grain. So therefore, you cannot count the grapevine as part of the separated space between grains, because if that were to mingle with any grain, it would make that grain forbidden. So therefore, it must be regarded as, so to speak, extraterritorial. Okay? These are only edible, right? Kilayim only applies to edible plants, not to any inedible plants. Varei asked the Gemara, that can't be the logic. Wait a minute. Varei kever osur banoya. A grave is forbidden to have, you're not allowed to have benefit with it, and nonetheless we said that in the Mishnah the vacant space of a grave does join up to create the 10 amma space. So what's the difference? So Gemara gives a very obvious difference. Kever ain't isuro nikar, but a kever, it's not obvious that it create. And I'm going to explain this perhaps more abstractly. By a kever, it's not part of, but it's true it's forbidden to plant there, but that is not part of the kilayim issue. You're not allowed to plant on a grave because a grave is also to derive benefit from, because of halachos have to do with and deriving benefit from dead bodies, or from the kever which is affiliated with the dead body. But that is nothing to do with kilayim, with the prohibition of kilayim, whereas deriving benefit from the grapevine is a kilayim issue. So therefore, vis-a-vis kilayim, a grapevine must be regarded as extraterritorial. Vis-a-vis the halacha of kilayim, a kever, although it has its own isser anah, since that isser of benefit has nothing to do with kilayim, therefore it doesn't have to be regarded as extraterritorial. Ask the Gemara, va'avodas hagefen ein isur banoya? Wait a minute. On the other hand, that may be true, but after all, the reason why there's 6 tefachim of vacant space on every side of a grapevine is because a grapevine is asur b'anoah, and therefore the surrounding environs must be asur b'anoah as well. Meaning that we have to have 6 tefachim on all sides of the grapevine in order the grapevine shouldn't have intermingling with other grain around it. So therefore, that 6 tefachim around the grapevine should also be considered to be extraterritorial. Okay. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel, I'm sorry, our mission is going like Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel Omar, ain't avoided l'gefen yechidis. Rabbi Shmuel says that one does not require a distance of 6 tefachim between a solitary grapevine and surrounding grain. The only time Rabbi Shmuel required it is between a vineyard and surrounding grain, but not between a solitary grapevine surrounding grain. And therefore, since that is the case according to Rabbi Shmuel, we're saying in our mission, specifically according to Rabbi Shmuel, that the 6 tefachim which surrounds the grapevine, a vacant space, joins up to make up the shiur of the 10 amos required between the two types of grain. Now, there's the the Rash, who's a Rishon here, takes out the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words till Tvua. It's locked. The Rash is not in there. It's a commentary in the Mishnayos, but very often he throws in. Not very often, all the time he brings down the Gemaras and talks about the Gemaras. Rishon, yeah, the Rash Mishans was one of the Bali Tosfos. Now, says Gemara, do you have the place Tvua b'Tvua? Well, you'll have to catch up. Yeah, Tvua b'Tvua. If you have, we said in our Mishnah, if you have grain next to grain, base rova, you have to have between them a area of 10 amos. Again, the 10 amos separation between two types of grain. Now it says, we said this once before. We said that there's a prohibition of having grain of one sort surrounded on all four sides by grain of another sort, even if there's a distance of 10 amos between the outer perimeter of grain and the inner one. Now the Gemara asks, Rabbi Zira, boy, kumi Rabbi Yasa. Rabbi Zira asked in front of Rabbi Yasa, do we say Hada Bika Simunia, the valley of Simunia, which is an extremely large valley? You're not allowed to plant only one type of grain there. Now I should mention that there are two ways to make chavusha. One way to make chavusha is, of course, to plant a perimeter of grain of one sort and put grain of another sort in the middle. Another way, which is more is referring to by Bika Simunia, is that they had a fence around the entire valley. It's a large valley, the Great Wall of Simunia. It's around the entire valley. So says Rabbi Zira, you can't plant in the entire area of Bika Simunia only one type of grain because it's surrounded by a fence, because it's chavusha, meaning that the 10 amma distance would not be sufficient there because it's surrounded by a fence. It makes no sense. And the Gemara doesn't answer this question. And the Stipler's son, who wrote the commentary, which is on the bottom of my Gemara here, says very interesting. He says the Rambam doesn't bring down any of the halachas of chavusha. Meaning the Rambam never says this halacha that where you have a perimeter of one grain, you can't plant another grain in the middle, nor that when you have a fence that prohibits you from planting two types of grain within the fence, because the Gemara here ends with a question which is not ever resolved. That what would be the definition of the extent of the fence which would prohibit the planting of kilayim therein. So therefore he hypothesizes perhaps that's why the Rambam leaves out the entire halacha of a chavusha, because the Gemara here ends with a kasha and never resolves it.
Yeah, but let's come on.
Yeah. Right, the other type of chavusha should exist. Yes. Good question. Okay? It's only a hypothesis which he presents, not necessarily true. Surrounded. Yeah, enveloped. Literally means a prison. There are two types. One is where a fence surrounds an area and then you can't plant two types of grain within that fence. Another is where one type of grain surrounds another type of grain. You plant it like in a box. Okay? It says Mar Mesiv Rabbi Eliezer Rabbanon, Rabbi Eliezer asked Rabbanon, Kimodi Yitzchon Kal B'Shur. Now this is going back on the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Eliezer says there's a distance. I think I skipped the line when I read the Mishnah before. Rabbi Eliezer says the Mishnah said that the distance between a yerek and a yerek, between two types of vegetables, 6 tvachim. Then the Mishnah went on to say tvua b'yerek, when you have a grain next to a vegetable, or yerek b'tvua, or a vegetable next to a grain, it's based over this has to be 10 amos. Rabbi Eliezer said no. Yerek b'tvua shisha tvachim. If you have a grain next to a vegetable, all you need the distance between one and the other 6 tvachim, not more than that. Okay. So he's a kula, right? It's only 6 tefachim. Just like we treat 2 vegetables, you only require 2 to 6 tefachim. You don't treat a vegetable and a grain, you only require 6 tefachim. Whereas Rabbanan obviously holds very, very much more stringent that you need 9 plus amos more. You need between one grain and a vegetable, you need a full 10 and a quarter amos. So it says the Gemara, Ramesiv Rabbi Eliezer l'Rabbanin. Rabbi asked the rabbis, just like you hold that there is a leniency by a row, v'chomer b'meruba, and a stringency by a box. We'll explain what this means in a minute. Now here the Rashi Releo, which is a commentary, which is in the back of the Gemara, not on the page itself, changes here the language of the Yerushalmi here. He says, Kain isli kal b'meruba. I also hold that there's a kula, a leniency in a square. Now, what does this mean? We're going to learn later on, in a few lines, that if you're planting not a field of vegetables next to grain, even Rabbanan hold no distance is required whatsoever. The only distancing which is required between vegetables and grain is when you have 2 patches next to each other. But if you plant a strip of vegetables right next to a grain field, that's okay. That's fine.
Those 2 distinct areas.
2 distinct areas, right. Which is we're going to discuss the parameters of that in a few minutes. 1 furrow. A furrow. I think the Gemara is going to tell us exactly what the definition of strip is, but not yet, in a few lines. Whereas, so, just like you have a kula by a strip and a severity by a square, meaning a patch, I hold the same that there's a kula also by a square. In other words, a square also doesn't require as the distance of 10 tefachim, 10 amos. All it requires is a 6 tefach gap. Like we learned, where do we see this halach of a strip? If you want to make a strip of vegetables within your grain field, you're allowed to do that. How do you do it? You must make a strip which is 10 amos wide, 10 amos long, excuse me, and 10 amos of mechza, at 10 amos and a half, a roch of shisha by 6 tvachim wide. It can't be smaller than that. Why can't you make a smaller strip than that? It has to be nikkar, right? It has to be recognizable as being an independent thing. So it's got to be at least 10 and a half amos wide by 10 and a half amos long by 6 tvachim wide. Okay?
What's the source? The 10 and a half plus 6 is nikkar.
Logic. There is no pasuk for any of this. There's no psukim for anything which we're learning right now. Later on this evening we'll have psukim, but not now. There's all pure logic. So,
Why is that logical?
well, if we're not farmers. You have to be. We're all city slickers, but the assumption is that farmers know exactly. Obviously, they picked 10 and a half. You know, they didn't pick a round, nice Jewish number like 12 or 7. No, it has to be 10 and a half. 10 and a half. So anyway, caught at the time, like we said again, I wrote to last so sure told state for somebody wants to make a row of vegetables within a grain field. You make 10 and a half amma long furrow, a row of shisha by 6 tefachim wide. Okay, so it's actually not more than 1 furrow. I shouldn't say it's a furrow. It's a strip, and we're going to see in a minute that in that 6 tefachim width, there are going to be several vegetable plants. Rabbi Yochanan said, Yochanan said, if you want to create this type of strip next to your field, it has to be recognizable that it's all one unit of vegetation, and therefore it can only be one type of vegetation within that strip. Rabbi Zir said that's not always true. Rabbi Yochanan concedes, Shayu Shiva, that where the strip was 7 tefachim wide. Shuzarea tefach mikan v'tefach mikan. You plant a tefach on each side, and also chamisha in the middle 5, which you leave fallow. Nidoim l'kan concluded in either side's reckoning. There's an interesting halacha. Here you have, normally, the strip itself has to be 6 tefachim wide. However, here, where the strip is 7 tefachim wide, so in this case here, picture number Chav Zayin in this Gemara, you have 1 tefach over here of vegetation, another tefach over here of vegetation, 5 tefachim fallow in the middle. This strip is considered to be filled in by the fallow area, and that strip is considered to be filled in by the fallow area.
6 on each side.
It's really 6 on each side that way, and that's okay. Okay? So says the Gemara, Mad Rebbe Zira. For now, it's Rebbe Zira. Now here's is messed up again. It should be Mad Rebbe Zira. The next word is the stipler takes out. Mimad Rebbe Zira. Al the Rabbi Yochanan Tamon. For that which Rabbi Zira just said here, it's the same thing Rabbi Yochanan had said previously. We had this a few blot ago. There was a case like this here, in this scenario over here. The halacha is, if you want to plant, you're allowed to plant, we had learned back then the concept of Rosh Tor. You're allowed to plant one field on an angle to another field. However, that's only if and they can be immediately adjacent to each other as long as one is angled against the other one. However, we have learned that that's only true where the angled field of grain is at least a base rova in size. But we said if you had one base row, half base rova of one type of grain, then another half base rova in the middle, which is fallow, and then another half base rova of another type of grain, we said that the fallow half base rova in the middle joins up with either one of them to constitute a full base rova in theory, if that not in practice. So that's the same principle we're applying here, that fallow strips in the middle are considered to be fulfillment of either side. Okay? Over there we said it in that context, and here we said it in this context here. It's the same idea. Says the Gemara, Nata Chatzi Shura. What if you had planted half that strip, say 5 1/4 amos long by 6 tefachim wide? You planted half the strip, and now you want to plant right next to it. You want to start another strip. Now you intended perhaps to finish that 5 1/4 strip, which you started, but you haven't finished it yet. And you want to plant in the interim, before you finish it, another type of grain or vegetable right next to it. That's forbidden. You have to first complete the strip which you are making. Rechista Mar Asur. Rechista said it's forbidden until you finish the entire length of the strip, which makes it discernible as a unit unto itself. You can't plant any other type next to it. We say to the guy, either approve with that which you already planted, or finish it before you start on planting any other type of commodity immediately adjacent thereto. Rabbi Yehuda said the following issues of machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda Amar is Palgun Rabbi Chia bar Bar, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Chia bar Bar and Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak had the following machlokes. Chad Amar filu shlosha l'toch shisha. That which we say that you cannot plant a half a strip and then plant something immediately next to it, it's only in the length of the strip. But what about in the width of the strip? It's a machlokes. Let's say you planted only 3 of the 6. The other 3 are still fallow. So one said that that's okay. So long as you planted 3 of the 6, it's fine. You can plant the next to the strip something else which is not of the same type. Charon Amar, no, that's not good, but this is good. If you have a case like this is sufficient. Let's find the picture. See that? One row of the 6 tefachim width. You have 3 rows of vegetation. 1, 2, 3, which don't take up the entire 6 tefachim, because there are gaps in the middle. But that's okay. That already constitutes something recognizable. Why? Because all the boundaries of this patch, of this strip, and the middle of the strip are taken up by seedlings. Okay, so that works. Okay, that's what Gemara is saying. Not when it's like this, where you planted 3 and left 3 fallow next to it, but only where you distribute it within the strip. Okay, says Gemara further. I don't know which of these two Amoraim which I quoted was of which opinion. Rabbi Yossi said that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Chia said B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, Uvat shelo yesham chareva, as long as there is no desolate area. In other words, that you can put 3 out of 6 is enough, but you can't have empty. What's the word? Literally means desolate places, charevas. But you can't have empty spots. You can't have bald spots. You can't have bald spots within those 3 tvachim. So from this I derive. I have a Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yitzchak, Udamar, Afilu Echam, Mikam, Vecham, it must be that Rabbi Shmuel Yitzchak, the other opinion, who's the one who holds that you have one on one side, and the other on the other side. Because in this case, you have bald spots. This leaves a lot of bald spots. Rabbi Yochanan wouldn't allow this.
The first Magiyamar says, it doesn't say what the arrangement is.
No, but the assumption is that there's no bald spots in that arrangement. That's what we're saying here. It must be this case leaves no bald spots, right? Because you have all 3 tvachim which you planted solidly. This case leaves many bald spots, right? So Rabbi Chia named Rabbi Yochanan said this case is no good. It must be that he holds only this case is good, 3 out of 6, as opposed to dispersed plants across the 6 tefach strip. Okay, that's what the Gemara is saying. These must be heavily packed, no bald spots. Vegetables.
How many different kinds?
One. This is all just one kind of vegetable. Because it's fallow. It's not planted with another type of grain. So his rationale is that it looks like part of the strip which hasn't yet been cultivated. I understand. It's a chiddush what he's saying. I agree with you. It's a novel concept. But he's saying that the 3 fallow, since they're immediately adjacent to 3 which are thickly planted, are considered to make up a full strip. Okay. Sorry about that. I can only tell over the Gemara. I can't shape it. Yeah. I'm not the Rosh. That's the problem. No, can't do that. Maybe the next time I go through Yerushalmi, I'll try and. Says Gemara, now everybody agrees. Like in this case, even Rabbi Yochanan agrees. If there's strips, if there are few broad spots, but they're far outweighed by the planted areas, such as this picture, then that's okay even called Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan holds this case no. Bechia Barba named Rabbi Yochanan holds this case is bad, all right? Because there are a lot of bald spots, but this case, since it's primarily planted, that's considered sufficient. This case. Well, but even this case, Rabbi Chia Barba named Rabbi Yochanan is not in our case, because there's a lot of bald spots between the outer perimeter and the middle strip. Okay, says more for the Tani, we learn Chamisha Dvarim Nemru B'Talasa Mitzris. 5 things were stated by the Greek courts. Now, between courts, as we mentioned in the Mishnah, have very, very luxuriant foliage, large leaves, which make a very, very complete canopy when they grow over things. So that causes certain halachas to be true about Greek courts. First of all, one cannot allow the Greek gourd to form a canopy over grain, because that creates kilayim. So if you have a dead body under Greek gourd, since the leaves create such a beautiful canopy that forbids a Kohen from standing under the gourd because it causes the tumor to spread underneath the gourd. And vice versa, chotzetzes is a tumor. If you have tumor above the gourd, you're allowed to stand under the gourd, and vice versa. It interrupts the tumor from spreading. V'oktzot tefach, the gourds themselves, what is considered to be the handle of the gourd. In other words, there's a certain halacha by Tumah and Tara that if you touch the handle of a fruit, meaning the amount of twig which makes it convenient to carry the fruit, so then the fruit itself becomes tummy. You're tummy, I'm assuming. So you're matame the fruit. So what's considered to be the shiur of the handle? Normally, the handle of a fruit is very small, right? But here, since the gourds are very large, the gourds themselves are very large, the shiur of a handle is a tefach. Okay, that's considered to be the amount of twig which is affiliated with the fruit. And when you have any Greek gourds growing in the vicinity of any type of other growth, so it immediately asers. There is no minimum shiur for it to aser. We learned before that sometimes the shiur is 1/24th and so on and so forth. Here it asers immediately because they're so significant. Says Gemara, Hanoider, besides that, one more, Hanoider minadluim, somebody takes an oath not to get benefit from gourds. The only gourd which his oath applies is the Greek gourd, because the Greek gourd is considered to be so choshev and so significant that by definition it is the gourd which you meant in taking your oath. Okay, says the Gemara further. Rabbi Yerushalmi asked the question on this enumeration of the unique qualities of Greek gourds. Why don't we say mevia es hatuma v'chotzetzes es hatuma tarti? Why do we enumerate that it causes the tumor to spread underneath its canopy, and then it interrupts the tumor which is on the other side of its canopy? Why don't we enumerate that as two qualities? And I think it was only one quality. Yeah. Koshu and Noida Minat Luin. Okay? So Tai Bar Korah, in this vein, Bar Kapor enumerated 7 qualities. And we kind of allowed to have any awning over, any canopy over any seeds. It causes tumor to spread underneath its canopy. It interrupts tumor from spreading. It has a handle of a tefach. This is a new one, which we hadn't seen previously, that if you want to put any other growth next to it, you have to leave 6 tefach of space, just like a grapevine. Because it's considered to have so much significance that there must be 6 tefach gap between it and anything else. And now a couple of other new things, that it creates kilayim with Aramean gourds, kilayim mutza and kilayim with a remutza, which is another type of gourd, because they're different types of gourds. He counted these 7 qualities. Lotani says, but he did not mention the quality that it asers that its forbidden quantity is minute. A koshu is asers. The Lotani also didn't mention the concept of nether. Rabbi Yosef said, Rabbi Gamliel said, Rabbi Nafik L'Shuki went out to the shuk. Asur Shalei, they asked him, Sibuch Sha'amru Benogea. Our Mishnah said that if you have the distance between 2 grains, or 2 vegetables at the base, even if on top they come close to each other, right, because they incline into the vacant space, our Mishnah said it's okay. So they asked him, what about if they actually touch over the top? So by Greek gourd, obviously that's not good. We said it can't touch at all. But here, what about anything else? What about if it touches? Rabbi Gamliel, son of Rebbe, went and asked his father, Rebbe, even if it touches, that's okay. As long as at the bottom you have the necessary distance, if on top they touch, it doesn't bother us. Okay? It's a significant leniency. Rabbi Yerushalmi said, Rabbi Hillel, same idea. Rabbi Hillel, Rabbi Valos, Rabbi Hillel, son of Rabbi Valos, Nafik L'Shuki went out to the marketplace. Also, Shalom Lay, they came and asked if this thing applies to touching as well. Also, Shalom Avoy, and he came and asked his father, Rabbi Valos, does apply even if they touch. It said in our mission, the Rebbe said that I have a tradition to be machmir, that even not just by Greek gourds, but by two other types of plants, by kishus, which is another type of squash, or hops, I'm not sure which one, and by Egyptian legumes, the one is not allowed to allow the trees to incline towards the vacant space. Rabbi said, however, after having brought down this tradition, he says, I don't think my tradition is right. I like the tradition mentioned by the other Tanoim. So says the Gemara, what does it mean? I see that words are over mine. Rabbi Chanina, im tlas mitzvahs, she mesabeches at Omar mutter. If an Egyptian gourd, which does, Egyptian, not Greek, Egyptian gourd, which does get mixed in with other trees, you say, I'm not concerned, and that's okay. Kishul which are not so luxuriant, even as a Egyptian gourd, Lokoshke, it's certainly okay. All right, Rabbi Abba Mori said, Lokenava Rabbi Mona Amar. This is not how Rabbi Mona learned this issue. Rather, and the next two words are taken out by the Orzarua. Kol hein ditzina kishus pula mitzri. Not that it's a kavachomer. That if the Egyptian gourds are okay, certainly kishos and Egyptian legumes are okay. Rather, he learned that by definition, this is a congruent type of tree. Kishos and pula mitzri are the same as Egyptian gourds. Ma'ron es divrei midvarai. So ask the Gemara, why did Rabbi accept the logic of the rabbis over his own tradition? Because none of them have the unique qualities of creating such a luxuriant and far-spreading and, frankly, the getting mixed, the capacity that could get mixed up with other trees, that kind of canopy as much as a Greek gourd, so therefore Greek gourd should remain unique. And I'm sure if you're somewhat mystically inclined, you can extrapolate from a Greek gourd to Greek culture and say something about how Greek culture tends to intertwine in its luxuriance with any type of ideology. But not for tonight. We're not learning Jewish, we're learning halacha, and then we go on to the next parak, which begins to discuss a new concept which we haven't seen yet, the concept of aruga. Now maybe the pictures here, I have good pictures in here, but maybe the pictures in here are even better.
Enjoy.
I don't know if it's better, but there are a lot of pictures, a lot of cute pictures here. Okay. Okay? So he never left Eretz Yisrael. A vegetable patch. This is a vegetable patch. It's a miniature patch. It's 6 by 6 tefachim. So bear in mind, it's only with a minuscule area here. This is almost 6 by 6 tefachim here. 1, 2, 3. Right? So it's about 3 tefachim.
I really don't understand. Within an area of 6 tefachim, you go, we're all city slickers, you drive outside of the city and you see farmers planting their vegetables. There are very distinct rows. Much more than 6 tefachim.
Right. But we're going to learn now, you'll have to adjust what we're about to learn because it's not what you think it is. Let's see what we're going to see. In this area of 6 by 6 tefachim, you can plant within it chamisha zironim, 5 types of grain. You have an area of 6 by 6 tefachim and plant within 5 types of grain. 4 on the 4 sides of the aruga, vechad be'emtza, and 1 in the middle. Now, there are many different interpretations of this line. Here, I'll show you some of the interpretations here. It's in the art scroll, it brings down a couple, but not all of them. What does it mean, 4 on the 4 sides and 1 in the middle? So here are a few ways of learning. Rashi learns, this is Rashi. Rashi has, you have a strip here, a strip here, a strip here, a strip here, and one seedling in the middle. Okay? These only touch on an angle. You see that? So therefore that's okay, because touching on an angle is okay. The one's on the perimeter. The one in the middle, since it needs to have something close to 3 tefachim to two each side, so that's why you only can put one seedling there in the middle. Okay? That's the Rashi. The Tosfos doesn't like this concept of Rosh Torah, because after all, we mentioned in the previous pair, the Rosh Torah has to emanate from a rova, from a base rova. Now granted, that was grain, and this is vegetables, and never the twain shall meet. But nonetheless, he doesn't like the concept of touching by Rosh Torah, so therefore he has the four sides being much shorter amounts of grain. So you get 3 tefachim as he has drawn on the angle between each type of grain. Okay, so that's the 3 tefachim distance there. Okay, that's the Tosfos. The Rosh holds it's like this. Very cool picture, right? You have the 4 types of grain go in cut-off arrowheads, right? And they're cut off in such a way as to leave 3 tefachim distance between the tops of the arrowheads, and the halacha is that the one seedling then I can be mako and put at a distance of a tefach and a half from each one of the tops of the cut-off arrowheads. See that? All these are types of 5 grains. That now the kash according to Rashi, which the Stipler son asked, if that's the case, why can't you plant even more? Plant 9 types of grain, like this. See? I'm sorry, not on the Rashi, on the Rosh. On the Rosh, why can't you plant 9 types of grain? If you all you had is need a tefach and a half gap between each one. So then have a tefach and a half between each one and plant 3 on each perimeter, 3 on each side of the perimeter, which altogether makes 8, right? And 1 seedling in the middle, which will make 9. So he says the doichak answer is that you can't do that because it's too many in one patch. After it's a small patch. So 9 types of grain, it no longer looks orderly and distinct. And therefore, the maximum you can have is 5, not 9. Even though hypothetically the measures would work out, in practice we don't allow it. The Rambam learns this Mishnah like this. The Mishnah is 5 types of grain, but he allows Rosh Torah in this case, even in the middle one. So here he has a very significant leniency, right? That the middle square can be on an angle to the 4 surrounding rectangles, and you can fill up much more of the patch. Okay, again, because of the angle theory. The kasha on the Rambam, which is type of son asked, is that again you should be able to get 9 in. Right? So you should be able to get 9 in. So again, the answer which you could give, although it does give a different answer here, the answer you could give is that you need at least a tefach. I'm sorry, you can't have 9. Same answer for the Rashi. You can't have 9. It looks like too many. But he gives another answer. He says that you need to have at some area, at some place, gaps in this picture, which are actually 2 tefachim. But in this case over here, if you had a checkerboard, there's no gap of more than a tefach. So, or no gap of tefach and a half. There are gaps of more than a tefach, but no gap of more than a tefach and a half. So therefore it's no good. But that seems like a very complicated answer. Simple answer seems to be like just like the Rash didn't allow 9 because it's too many different types. So too the Rambam, the same thing. Okay. Now that's the Mishnah. Not all the Mishnah, but the Mishnah we learned till now. Hayla Gvul. Let's say you had around the patch. You had a gvul, a border. Now this border is gavoa tefach, it's a tefach high. And slopes count. So you see what's happening? We have 6 by 6, and then we have a tefach higher, and then you have a border of a tefach wide. So it's all together we're dealing with 8 by 8, right? I think it's 8 by 8. Dealing with 8 by 8 because you have a perimeter which is a tefach higher, well, on each side, and a tefach broader as well. Let me just make sure.
Where's the slope of
It's not a slope. It's a ridge. A ridge. Okay, it's not sloped at all. It's a ridge. Okay, so that's that's this case over here. All these cases over here. Yeah, 8. Okay. So in this case, also we were going to have several shitas, obviously, go following the shitas which we had at the beginning. But in the meantime, let's read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, you can't plan within it. It should shlosha asor, 13 types of vegetables. Shlosha kol gvul, 3 on each boundary, vecha bemtza, 1 in the middle. And again, you have various different interpretations here. You have here, it could be that it's a sheet, the Rashi sheet is that you need a tefach and a half separation between each one on the boundary. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you get in the middle, right, 5 tefachim worth approximately of grain in the middle. Then you have the sheet of the Rambam, which gives you even more leniency, right? You make the angle, as long as an angle, then it's okay, and so on and so forth. You get the idea, right? Okay. Now, by the way, in this case over here, the reason why he has 5 tefachim, according to the Rash, is because you have still a tefach and a half distance between this middle patch and the sides. Why? Because you have the chatzi tefach on each side of the 5 tefachim, plus you have what else? The tefach of the height of the ridge, right? They have the height of the ridge, which makes it a tefach and a half distance. You have a good picture of that there? Any better picture? Same thing. Essentially the same. Okay, fine. Yes. Okay? So, says the Gemara, Lo yita, a person should not plan rosh lefes b'toch hagvul. You should not, however, plant a turnip head as one of your vegetables on the boundary. Nation maleu, because it's not luxuriant like a Greek gourd. We're not talking about trees. We're talking about little vegetables. But it has a lot of leaves. Since there's a lot of leaves, it's going to take up more space than is permissible. Rabbi Yehuda Mer Shisha Be'emtza. Rabbi Yehuda says you get to plant 6 in the middle. And the one is going to learn how it's because it's not 5, it's 6. Now, what is Xeris If you asked me before for Psukim. Here's a pasuk. There's a pasuk where is it? Yisrael. It's one of the Sheva and the 7 haftarahs of Nechama, which we have coming up. So it says here that Ka'aretz totzi tzimcha ukigina zru'ah tatzmiach, like the land will give forth its full growth, and like a vegetable patch, zeru'eha, its seeds, multiple seeds, will grow. We see you can plant multiple seeds in a vegetable patch, and it won't be kilayim, because otherwise Yeshayahu Hanavi would not say you plant zeru'eha. You'd say kikina zara titzmach. Why? How can you say zeru'eha tatzmiach? It must be you can plant multiple seeds in a vegetable patch. Do you see that? It says zeru'eha, plural. So it must be you can plant at least 2 types of seed in a vegetable patch, because it says in a gina, in a patch, a vegetable patch, you can plant zeru'eha. That's lashon rabim. That's plural. So you get to plant at least 2. The question that we get up to 5, but at least 2 we got. Okay?
Why does it say types? What would that mean?
What?
Of one type.
That should just say zara. Zara, if we're talking about a lot of one type, we would not use plural. We would say it's seed. Because in Hebrew, zara means, like by Paro we say sus v'roch b'rom v'yam. So a lot of the same thing is in Hebrew grammatically is called by the object itself. Though we don't use rabim for that. We don't use plural for that. Right? Sus v'roch b'rom v'yam, where God drowned the Egyptians. So it says horse and rider means all the horses and all the riders, right? So since they're all the same type of horse, the same type of rider, so therefore it says sus v'rochbo. Here too, we're referring to multiple seeds of the same type. Would say zara, wouldn't say zruel. Okay. Now the thing is that only indicates 2, because miut rabim shnayim. The minimum amount of multiples is 2. How we get up to 5? That takes some talent here. Rav Shulbai said, Mishnayim at lo meida harba. If you can plant 2, you can plant 4. For sure. Why is that? Because how do you plant 2? The way you plant 2 is by the good old angle theory, the Rosh Tor theory. So how do you get 2? Like this. By the way, I skipped a whole bunch of pictures here in the Mishnah just for simplicity's sake. I hope you're moichel me. But he says here, this is how you get 2, right? By angling. Well, then you get 4 as well. How you get 4? By having a German cross, right? World War I cross, not a World War II cross. Right? So that you have that if you can have 2 by angling, you can have 4 by angling. Okay? That makes sense? So we're already up to 4. If 2 works, 4 works. How do you get a 5th one? So it says the Gemara again. You put at the beginning of 6 and you narrow it in. So to 4, you put at the beginning of 6 and you narrow it in. And since all these are Rosh Tors, so you can put in the middle a single seedling as well. There's an interesting thing. I'm not sure I understand the logic of that. But if you get 4 angles, you get 1 seed in the middle, which is that angle to all the different 4. That's how you get 5. Okay? Is that clear? You don't have to like it. That's what it says here. That's how you get 5. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yerushalmi said, Avoida pogea ba'avoida. You're allowed to have a case of where the actually he's attacking the point which I just mentioned, saying this is okay. The avoida, meaning the area of this patch could touch this avoida. That's okay. That I agree with you. However, says Rabbi Yerushalmi, ve'ein min pogea b'chaveiro l'chovsho. What right do you have to allow this seed in the middle, which is going to be surrounded by all the other seeds? That can't work. So therefore, you can't create such a scenario because this seed in the middle is not at an angle. It's surrounded by all types of seeds. So that's no good. So the Gemara really doesn't answer that question. I assume what the Gemara would have answered is that, well, I can still draw you a scenario which you get 5 because of all the scenarios I had previously, right? It's true that this scenario 5, the German cross is no good, but all these scenarios of 5 do work. So therefore, if you can make 2, you can make 4. If you can make 4, you can make 5. I can make 5 by any of the scenarios, the Rashi, the Taisis, the Rash, and so on and so forth. Okay? Says more further.
Repeat one.
Yes.
Going back there.
Sure.
In the Rosh Tor, is there the head of the triangle? Is there a seed at the head of the triangle?
A seed of the same type.
Whatever's below.
Right.
Yes. They're immediately adjacent. They're hard up against each other.
Right. So you have 2. So to me, in effect, how do you have a Rosh Tor with the 4 crosses? Except for the case of the prior page, where this way they're definitely separate. You can have the seedling in the middle. You have the Rosh Tor or whatever you don't even need it.
Right.
But here, the only way to have the Rosh Tor is to have the seedling in the middle share in all of them.
Right. I think that's really part of the Gemara's question. You don't think that's what Gemara's asking when it calls it chavusha?
But I think but that's the solution.
You're right.
In order for the Rosh Tor.
But how can it be part of any of those if it's a different type of seed than any of those?
Well, I guess maybe it has to be one of those.
But it can't. Then we wouldn't get up to 5. We're trying to get up to 5. Right, we only have 4. We're trying to get up to 5. Which is why the Gemara probably would have had to resort to one of those. That's why I think. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, Shimon Levi holds like we had said in our mission that it's possible to get 6 and not just 5. He darshans. Now here also the gears is messed up. Here the Rav Fulda, so Nachron changed the gears, so it should be Zera. It says Ruel, so it could have said Zera, right? So let's see what's actually there. Could have once it said Zera. Okay, should have been Zera. He added on a hey and made it Zara. Then you added on a yud and made it Zruela. So there are 2 extra words there, 2 extra letters there. 2 extra letters teach us each one is multiplied, right? Zera would be
be many according to what you say.
Right. But he's not darshing that the way. I'm sorry. No, these are all achronim. The Pnei Moshe is an achron. Yeah, there are no rishonim on the page here. But he says here, the way the Stipler's son explains it, he's actually darshaning the amount of letters. Because it says Zera would have been 3 letters. Doesn't say that. It says Zara, which is 4 letters. Doesn't say that. It says Ru'eh, which is actually 5 letters. That's no good. No, it's written Chaser.
Really? This one has a written mullet. Oh, it has a yud.
Oh, I see. Okay, it's not like Rabbi Yehuda. Fine. No, that's where it's going to bring it down. Right, that's the gears. That's how he could. That's why the Rav Fold and the changed the gears. So, look, this way we have Shimon Levi says Zera. It could have said Zera. It could have said even Zara, but it says Zru'eh. 5 letters. That's 5 meaning. Uchu Rabbi Yehuda. How do you like Rabbi Yehuda, who says 6 meaning? The Rabbi Yehuda Amar, because Rabbi Yehuda explained that. Because explains Shisha there's 6. Zera, Zru'eh, Zera, Zara, Zru'eh, and he learns that Zru'eh is written Mole with 6 letters. Which it's actually the machlokas how the word is written in the Navi. It's written 5 letters, which should be 5 meaning, or 6 letters, which should be 6 meaning. Okay, so that's actually the machlokas. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chagay Amar, Zru'eh Chamisha. Wherever it says Zru'eh in the Torah, it's 5. Or it should not. It should be with 5 letters. Kol ahein da'ana mishkacha shlo vav should be. Anytime I find an extra vav on a machikle, I erase it. Because it should be written chaser, not moli. It should be written with 5 letters, ru'el, without the extra vav, and not 6 letters with the extra vav. Ishtil, so Rav Huna sat for the siddur, because I asked Rav Huna, who was the sofer in the base medrash, and he, v'amar, and he said, Zru'eh Malya. No. So he said, that's what I originally used to do. I originally used to erase the vavs. Then I asked Rav Huna Safar, the Siddur, and he told me, no, every time it says Zru'eh, it's written Mole, and the attack of the vavs are there. Okay. Rabbi Yochum Hashem Rabbi Yana said, Kulam b'toch shisha. Everything we learn now is within the 6.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Normally, from now, the Gemara basically says, it's sort of like, it's not
secondary limud.
That's right.
Right.
The din doesn't really come from that limud.
But now let me make your question strong, because here, where have we ever seen a limud based on the amount of letters which there are in a word? Never saw such a thing. Yeah. I can't answer you. Because my feeling is that the Yerushalmi doesn't have the same types of drusha as the Bavli's. Which we're used to the Bavli's type of drusha, which is A, almost never from Navi. B, we don't darshan letters. We darshan words. Extra letters, perhaps. But now don't darshan the amount of letters. But it could be the Yerushalmi is a different methodology of drusha. So I don't want it to go, I don't know that I necessarily can even come legitimately and answer your question, because you're basing your question on a Babylonian premise, and we're learning Yerushalmi. It might not be the same thing. Okay, they might actually darshanach. We might see that they darshanach all over.
The way letters is written.
Yes, that's very strange. Yes. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yad said again, Kulun b'sel shisha, they're all within the 6 tvachim. Kahana b'shem Rishim B'log said, Kulun chutz the shisha. That's interesting. He holds that really it's not mutter to plant any of these within the patch, only surrounding the patch, meaning, like this. Not where you have a ridge, but rather where you actually have a patch of 8. See the patch of 8? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong picture. I'm sorry. Scratch that. This picture over here. See where you have the patch is 6, and you plant the extra 4 around the perimeters. So he says, all these heterim which we learned over a year in the Mishnah, which are to plant 5 types within the patch, that's prohibited. He says, what is okay? Only to plant the extra 4 types around the perimeter of the patch, on outside the patch. See, here's the patch. You do it only outside the patch, not within the patch. Excuse me? Still 5 kinds. He's machmir, because he holds you only plant it outside the patch, not inside the patch. Okay? The patch can only have 1 type within it. They still need a tefach and a half between each type, and it has to be outside the patch. Says the Gemara, if you have to plant them all outside, make it 9. Like this. Like Mem Hey. Why not make it 9? It'll work. So you can have a tefach and a half between each one and have 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Make it like this. Says Mar, you're right. Theoretically, you could have had 9. Why did the Mishnah tell you about 9? Says Mar, Omer Rabbi Tanchum Butzayro v'cheinu be'arugo she'ba'arugos himasnisa. This is the way it is. Our mission is talking about a patch among patches. Then you can only do 5. Why? Because then you have to vary them. This is a cool picture. This is the way you want to plant your field. You want to have multiple patches, one next to each other. Don't ask you why you're doing this. You're cockamamie. You're not doing this to make money, obviously, because this is a very, very inefficient way to plant your field. But you want to plant your field with the most possible meaning. So then you can't do more than 5 because you must alternate in order to maintain equal distance. You see how all these pieces interlock? So since that's the case, you can only do 5, 1 in the middle of each of these, and 4 on the perimeters, with each perimeter 1 corresponding to the interlocking space in the other one, in order to continuously get a difference of a tefach and a half between them. Okay? The reason why you can't do 9 is because then you couldn't make the interlocking mesh effect. Because then you'd have 1 in the middle of each side, which would impede this effect, and you wouldn't get the proper distancing. So when you're talking about making multiple patches in the same field, you need to have that interlocking effect, and that's why you have over here the case only with 5, 1 in the middle of each of these, and 4 in the perimeters, in order to achieve that interlocking.
You're saying there's 1
in the middle, right, which is not pictured. Yeah. Okay, we'll stop here for tonight. I believe we did our 2 plot plus something.